An update to tell you about in the case of a First Nation chief violently arrested by an RCMP officer earlier this year. Charges have now been dropped against Athabasca Chipewyan First Nation chief Allan 2 weeks after video of that arrest surfaced. Here is a reminder of what happened. Chief Adam was stopped in Fort McMurray, Alberta for an expired license plate. In the nearly 12-minute dash cam, an agitated Adam swears at police officers initially and accuses the RCMP of harassing them. But minutes later, what you just saw there, that happens. An arriving officer tackled Adam to the ground without warning, punching him in the head and putting him in a chokehold. This was the end result, a battered and bloodied face. The Crown has now dismissed charges against Chief Adam of resisting arrest and assaulting an officer. The incident is being investigated by Alberta's Serious Incident Response Team, but an initial review by the RCMP found the officer acted responsively. Chief Allan and his lawyer, Brian Beresh, join me from Fort McMurray. Hi there, Chief. Hi, Mr. Beresh. Good to see you both again.
Afternoon.
Yep.
Chief Adam, I want to start with you. Upon receiving this news, how did you feel?
I felt relieved in regards to justice being served.
What can you, I'll ask Mr. Beresh sort of the legal, sort of what happened legally, but what can you tell us about what you think led to this decision?
I think that the prosecution reviewed the videotape, which was the largest piece of evidence in our support, and found that there was not a reasonable likelihood of conviction and that potentially maybe the wrong person was charged.
Chief Adam, do you think this would have happened if the video had not publicly been released?
I don't think so. I think they would have carried it out through the courts and pursued the arrest charge and resisting arrest. And
what does that say to you?
It says to me that there is a systemic racism problem within the RCMP based on the fact that no matter who you are and who you represent, your skin color determines their actions about how they're going to conduct their policing towards you.
What does it say to you, Mr. Beresh? Do you think that this would have happened should it not have been made public?
I suspect the matter would have gone to trial, and you can appreciate that we asked that the police voluntarily make it public. They refused to do that. We had to bring a court application, and it was attached to that, and that's how it became public. So very disappointing that the police were not even transparent in terms of their own recordings.
Chief Adam, I'm wondering if you can weigh in on the discussion that has ensued ever since that video was made public around systemic racism in the RCMP, and in particular, the leadership of the RCMP and whether or not they believe that to be a fact. Commissioner Lucky at first wouldn't say it, then a few days later did say that it exists. She testified in a House of Commons committee about it last night as well. Do you think that the leadership of the RCMP is adequately seized with the issue? Like, do you think they're capable of solving the problem?
If they're capable of solving the problem, then they should have addressed the problem when they first came into power about the issue. Because Commissioner Polson was given the same task when he was assigned to a commissioner back in 2016 at the AFN, that they were going to be dealing with systemic racism within the RCMP. Commissioner Polson reluctantly failed to come up with a plan and never did anything. And when he stepped aside, Commissioner Lucky stepped in, and thinking that because there's a new commissioner in town, the systemic racial problem has disappeared. It has not disappeared, it hasn't gone anywhere, and it's still a lot of work to be done within that department.
She did say that at the House of Commons. She did say it does exist. There is a ton of work to do. I'm committed to doing it. Do you believe that she can do it, or do you think that there needs to be more fundamental change?
I think Commissioner Lucky and the Deputy Commissioner and all the commissioners across the country with their Deputy Commissioners should go spend 2 weeks out in the land with an elder and learn the ways of Aboriginal people. And when you're going out in the land, don't take your sidearms with you. Just go and learn the lifestyle of our people so you get to understand who we are, and then this way you could conduct your policing a lot better when it comes to our people.
Is that the magnitude of what you'd like to see happen? Like, is there more, or do you think that if that were to happen, they are capable of reforming the RCMP the way you would like to see it changed?
If they could conduct that right across this country, if every commissioner and a deputy commissioner could go out in the bush for 2 weeks and conduct that, and they will have an understanding that there is a serious problem, and then they could deal with it. But if they cannot learn to live like we do and understand how connected we are to the land, and then they will never be able to correct the problem. And if they can't correct the problem, and if they can't agree to the fact that going out in the land for 2 weeks, well, then maybe they should just step aside and let somebody else do it.
Mr. Beresh, can you tell me a bit about what happens now? And obviously the charges are no longer, but there is still an investigation going on about the police officers, the RCMP officers' actions. That officer, my understanding is, has not been suspended. Correct me if I'm wrong. And today you learned, I think it was today, that there was a previous charge levied against one of them as well.
We learned that recently as a result of courthouse searches that this officer in August of 2019 was charged with an assault, count of mischief, unlawfully being in a dwelling house, and his trial is set for September. So what concerns us is that 7 months later, when he comes onto the scene and tackles Allan, that someone subsequently reviewed that video and said there was nothing wrong. We think the police have to explain that. The top brass has to explain what sort of screen they use when they decide whether an officer's actions are reasonable or not.
Has anyone reached out to you or Chief Adam on that question? Because you have been raising it, and everyone really has right from the start, because as soon as the video became public, I mean, everyone from the Prime Minister on down had a certain reaction to it, and clearly that reaction was not shared by the RCMP, at least initially.
Yeah, I'm not sure who's been doing the thinking in terms of the organization. No one has reached out to me to inquire about should the officer be suspended. What are your thoughts about this? It's been the Attorney General's review of it. We know there's an independent investigation which could result in both officers being charged.
Chief Adam, what are your feelings on that?
My feelings is that, justice will find its way, and justice will be served. And today, justice was prevailed of the fact that accused of my wrongdoing of being of assaulting a police officer and resisting arrest, was never had any grounds to stand on in the first place, and therefore justice is being served in my matter. But then the matter of the RCMP in question, that remains to be a question where law authorities will make that decision, and I can't make that decision for them. I think based on the video itself, after the altercation that happened, you clearly hear my voice stating what I wanted to get done then. You hear my wife stating on that video as well what she wanted to get done, and nothing has been done today, so why would I want to repeat myself?
Chief, when we first spoke a few weeks ago, you had phone calls from, I think it was Minister Miller, as well as Premier Kenney. I think you said Tom Mulcair at the time as well. A lot of politicians reached out to you to apologize for what had happened to you. Have you had any conversations with those politicians since then? Have any of them reached out to talk about what potential solutions to this kind of a problem might be in the future?
The only minister that called me was Minister Wilson, because he's the Minister of Aboriginal Affairs in Alberta, and he was appalled over the fact about what had transpired and everything, and he's reaching out as a politician to find a solution in regards to how systemic racism in the RCMP or policing could be changed. And you got to understand that when Minister Wilson asks me that question, how could we conduct policing and deal with systemic racism in Alberta, I can't answer that question because Alberta itself just put a systemic racism bill, Bill 1, out that controls our people from going out and having peaceful protests.
And did you tell him that?
Well, he knows of those of that fact, yes.
But I guess, did you convey to him that you're not confident that he can reform a system if he's contributing to it, or his government is contributing to it?
Well, I don't think that at this point in time, if they're going to create a new bill that's going to give more authority to a police force, well then, I always said that's why we have to go back to the signing of the treaty and even go and get the understanding what it meant with the Royal Proclamation of 1763.
The intent of that bill, as the government describes it, I think, is to crack down, I guess, on protests that inhibit, the economy or projects from moving forward. What is your response to? I mean, that's what they say this is for. What is your response to that?
My response is this: that is a racist bill altogether, and that is above systemic racism because it comes from one of the head officials within this great country we call Canada, and it just happens to be the home province of where I live, and that's Alberta. And that shouldn't be tolerated within this day and age, and that has to stop. Those kind of behaviors only give more authority to law officials, and it just continues on to systemic racism even further.
Okay, I have to leave it there. I'm out of time. Thank you very much, both of you, for your time. Thanks to Chief Allan Adam and his lawyer, Brian Beresh.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Vashi Capellos, host of Power in Politics. See more of our show by subscribing to the CBC News channel or click the link for another video.